Welcome viewers, Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, New South Wales, Australia, and I've decided to, as far as I can, rerun the Australian Royal Commission videos on the channel. I just don't want people to forget what happened back there. Obviously, the Jehovah Witnesses are pretty ignorant of the Australian Royal Commission. So I'm going to do everything I can to try and run these videos. It's going to be lengthy, but I want to open it with Barbara Anderson's Watchtower documents. I'll put the link below. The Australian Royal Commission by Barbara Anderson. An Australian Royal Commission held formal public hearings to examine evidence about child sexual abuse within religious and charitable organisations in that country, in Australia, in my country. There are over 30 of these ongoing investigations involving a large number of religions and charities. Each public hearing examined a number of individual case studies involving different public and private organisations. Jehovah Witnesses were among the religious organisations being investigated. The Commission wanted to know specifically how Jehovah Witnesses and the Watchtower Society responded to allegations of child abuse involving members of their congregations. In 2015, the Royal Commission's public hearings involving Jehovah Witnesses were scheduled and heard in Sydney starting on Monday, July the 27th and continued through to August 14th, 2015. The intent of the hearings was to investigate the actual practices and policies of the Jehovah Witnesses and Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia Limited in situations of reported and suspected child abuse or endangerment. Following up hearings were scheduled for spring 2017 to review the Watchtower of Australia's policy changes and plans for corrective action. 2017. On March 10, 2017, the Commission held follow-up hearings to hear the Watchtower representatives' descriptions of any corrective actions taken by the Australian branch of Jehovah Witnesses over the past 18 months. More than 5 hours of sessions, the Commission was not satisfied and clearly disappointed with the testimony and voiced their displeasure with the efforts and official responses by the Watchtower branch representatives. Now that's serious. You can follow this link if you want to hear the hearings. And I'm going to put these hearings up in this rerun of the Australian Royal Commission program. The scope and purpose of the hearings were to inquire into the experiences of survivors of child sexual abuse within the Jehovah Witness Church in Australia, the response of the Jehovah Witness Church and the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia Limited to allegations, reports or complaints of child sexual abuse within the church, the systems, policies and procedures in place within the Jehovah Witnesses Church and the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia Limited for raising and responding to allegations of or concerns about child sexual abuse within the church, and the systems, policies and procedures in place within the Jehovah Witness Church and the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia Limited to prevent child sexual abuse within the church. During and after the hearings, the Commission provided witness lists, transcripts, exhibits, images and associated submissions for each case study and makes them publicly available on the Commission's website. And you can go to that website yourself if you want the evidence. Submissions. After hearing, the Council assisting the Royal Commission will provide witnesses and other people who were granted leave to appear at the hearing a written submission detailing what was discovered during the case study. The submission will outline key findings based on the hearing evidence and the recommendations likely to come from them. The recipients of the submission may then provide their own written submissions in reply. The Commissioners then consider this information and when they form their final recommendations during the course of the Royal Commission. In the articles below you will find videos of the live streams of the public hearings and transcripts of those hearings and complete sets of the exhibits used by the Commission that were provided by those involved in the case. Many of these exhibits have never been publicly available before. And here's some of the stuff you can see. But I'm going to go now to live footage from the Australian Royal Commission on the Jehovah Witnesses, Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, Church organisation. I hope you enjoy this series.
Mr. Spinks, just before we get to the question that I asked you before lunch, perhaps we can deal with the document you mentioned earlier. I'll hand you a copy of a document. Is this the document you were referring to, Mr. Spinks, when you said there was a 1998 document that you were able to find?
That's correct.
And on the third page, in the second paragraph, number 2, in other words, beneath the heading before forming a judicial committee, is that the paragraph you had in mind?
That's correct.
So it asks the question, when is it not advisable for the witness to confront the accused alone? What should the elders do? And then the answer is given when he is a party to the wrongdoing, is a victim, or is extremely timid. Children who are victims of molestation should not be required to confront the accused. In some cases, 2 elders or an elder and a witness can confront the accused. And this document you found in the circumstances you explained earlier, is that right?
Correct.
I tender the document, Sean.
What is the document? What is the document? What do I call it?
Your Honour, I'll ask the witness. How should we properly title this document, Mr. Spinks?
We know it as an S337 form, which is the 6-monthly outline that the circuit overseer, the travelling overseer, meets with all the elders in his circuit to discuss. So it's the circuit overseer's outline for the elders meeting, S337.
Well, we'll make the document 2920. What's the paragraph that you just took us to?
On the third page, the second paragraph, number 2, in other words, beneath the heading before forming a judicial committee, 4 minutes, and then there's this paragraph number 2.
Well, I'm not sure I've got the right document. Yeah. Where? Oh, I see. The second 2. Yes, I see.
Yes, Your Honour.
Very well. Yeah. Yep.
And are we to understand, Mr. Spinks, that this applied in the 6-month period, September 1998 through to February 1999?
The circuit overseer would have met with each body of elders successively through that 6-month period.
And that paragraph doesn't appear, I take it, in subsequent S337 forms?
Now, each one is completely different.
Yes, thank you.
So I understand the paragraph. The question is, and this contemplates one of your members asking a question, when is it not advisable, is that right, for a witness to confront the accused alone? Now, what should the elders do when he is a party to the wrongdoing? When he is a party, is a victim or is extremely timid? I'm not sure I'm understanding. Children who are victims should not be required to confront the accused. Can you help me to understand the English of this?
Certainly. So just the format, if I could briefly, is a question and answer discussion. So the circuit overseer would present the question, open it up for responses is the usual format for these meetings. And then the bracketed section is for him to either redirect or help the elders to see that this is the correct response. So in that it says, so we're now talking about the witness, victim, whichever. It says when that person is a party to the wrongdoing in one instance, so perhaps a shared sin, if that were the case, that wouldn't be appropriate. Secondly,
sorry.
Yep.
What wouldn't be appropriate?
Well, for example, we wouldn't be suggesting that the party to adultery, for example, would be required to confront the accused in that setting. So that's one scenario that where the witness is actually a party to the wrongdoing, involved in the wrongdoing, that wouldn't be an expectation. And then, or is a victim, so, or is extremely timid. So there's just some examples of settings where it wouldn't be appropriate.
Children, what about women who were abused as children? In other words, adults who come forward with an allegation that they were abused when they were a child.
Well, then they'd be a victim in that first sentence.
Right. Now, in some cases it said two elders or an elder and the witness can confront the accused.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean if an elder does it, they would do it with the witness? Is that the way that works?
Difficult for me to go back and interpret it fully, but how I would read that and read it at the time, that either two elders could confront the accused, or one elder and someone who's a witness to a particular type of wrongdoing.
And the elders again would be men?
The elders are men.
So in the scenario we contemplate, the child or adult abused as a child has to put their story in the hands of two men, is that right?
I think we've given examples for all the recent case studies that that's not an expectation that we have. Each of the cases that I reviewed back from recent times back show either the parents, a caring guardian, a friend, whoever it is, can work with the victim to have that put in writing. We don't see that there's a situation where the victim, unless they choose to do so, perhaps in the case of a mature minor or a survivor, might choose to do that, be happy to do it, but otherwise a statement, a written statement, either provided by the victim or the survivor, or recorded by a witness and an elder or two witnesses would be sufficient.
Yes.
Mr. Spinks, that is under the heading before forming a judicial committee, so that applies during that stage. Is that right, the investigative stage?
That's what that's referring to there, yes.
And then the next heading is judicial committee hearing procedure, and you'll see in paragraph 2 that the instruction is to explain what is to be done if the accused person does not admit guilt. And then in parenthesis it says the alleged wrongdoer has right to face his accusers. Are we to understand that in the judicial committee process, if the accused does not admit guilt, then the victim must make the allegation to the accuser?
No, that's not correct. And that's covered in questions that you've raised previously in the process of the judicial committee, where it says if for some other reason the letter presented to the accused is sufficient to face the accuser. So we wouldn't expect that a victim or a survivor would have to face the accuser, except in some instances where they wish to do that, and I am aware where that's happened on occasion, or that would be exceptional.
Well, would it be the case that one would expect circuit overseers who were presenting this discussion with elders in a particular 6-month period to have conveyed to the elders that the alleged wrongdoer has a right to face his accusers in the judicial committee procedure?
I think I understand. Could you just repeat that for me again, please?
The people to whom this was presented, I understand this is an outline for a discussion, a led discussion by circuit overseers. The persons to whom this was presented, the elders at that time, would from this, I take it, have understood that the alleged wrongdoer has a right to face his accusers in the Judicial Committee hearing procedure.
I think by default, this was in 1998, so the previous Elders Handbook, the KS 91, would have spelled out that procedure, and that may have already been mentioned through the course of the Commission. This statement here, and the comment I referred to from the 95 Watchtower, is clearly our realisation, the beginning of our realisation that there are situations that are exceptional and no more exceptional than a child abuse situation or a survivor or victim. So this is actually stating that there need to be exceptions to that usual judicial process.
Well, it's only stating it in respect of the pre-judicial hearing component. I mean, you agreed with that earlier.
That's
yes.
That's the subheading there, yeah.
Now, Mr. Spinks, getting back to the question I asked you just before the adjournment, have you been able to identify those components to the procedure that are scripture-based in such a way that you would not be, it would not be open to you to divert from them?
I took the question away with me. I'm happy to comment on it. It's a reasonably wide question. I think you used specifically the what you called the two witness.
I used that as what occurred to me to be an example of such a scriptural principle that can't be departed from.
That's correct. So if the question is, are Jehovah's Witnesses likely or open to changing the what we would see as a scriptural requirement repeated by Christ Jesus himself, that before you could take judicial action without, in the absence of other evidence or confession, that aspect of the process would need to be held in abeyance? Do I think that there's flexibility to change that? I don't see how, because it's a clear scriptural injunction. Is it right to say that because of that one witness rule, nothing can be done and nothing is done? That's certainly not the case, and the 2012 letter spells that out as well.
Well, perhaps we can come to those aspects in a minute. I'm just asking you to identify those aspects of the process which are scripturally based, such that you're not in a position to change them even if you wanted to. So you've identified the two witness rule as one component. Are there others?
I'm probably struggling. If you have a suggestion, I'm happy to listen to which component, but it seems to me that scripturally the two things that have been by His Honour and yourself raised are the process of having women involved in the judicial process as elders, as it were, or the requirement for, within our rules of evidence in handling a matter, in the absence of a confession or circumstantial evidence or other indicators, would we act judicially on one witness, as the courts may do? The answer would be no, and I don't see that changing in harmony with the scriptures.
Well, Mr. Spinks, we've already identified that. I'm now trying to see whether there's anything in addition to that. So, for example, I take it that it's a requirement of the scriptures that it is the elders who act judicially and not anyone else.
That's correct.
And I take it that it's a requirement of the scriptures that elders must be men and can't be women.
That's correct.
are there other components of the process that the scriptures require? For example, that the accused has a right to face his or her accuser.
I think we've discussed that. We have no expectation of a victim or a survivor having to face and there's nothing unscriptural about that.
So
they could do that in the form of a letter, as we've explained, or a statement, or other witnesses, and the investigation, the judicial process would gladly accept that.
So your understanding of the scriptures is that that's not a requirement of the scriptures, that the accused makes the accusation to the accuser?
Well, I think clearly, as with any rules of evidence, the accuser has that opportunity, whether that's via a letter, statement being presented with the facts, that conforms perfectly with the scriptural requirement.
What about in respect of outcomes? Is there a scriptural requirement with regard to what are the possible outcomes from a judicial process?
I think the scriptures are clear that they're 1 Timothy 5, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, where it talks about removing the wicked person, a practicer of wicked. So will Jehovah's Witnesses continue with the practice of excommunication, despite the fact that it's a rare arrangement in 21st century Australia? Yes, we will, because it's scriptural. Will we continue with the scriptural practice of reproving individuals who have shown themselves sufficiently repenting or reinstating into the congregation?
Yeah, Dr. Jason Morrison, theologist again. I just want to say thank you for watching the videos, and I hope you got plenty of self-rediscovery and freedom out of it. If you watched it on YouTube, please share or like, maybe even comment. If you watched it on Facebook, like, comment, share. But most of all, get out and live. This isn't a rehearsal. You've got a one-off life. Don't let your loyalty and your faithfulness blind you to the life that you should be experiencing. Till the next video, thank you for watching and bye for now.